morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of our in-person user group conference. I have some housekeeping items this morning. We have 4 exciting sessions for you today. Sorry, I'm reading from a script. For this first session, Brian Cohn, myself, and Kelly Encinias, am I saying your name right? we'll be discussing our small medium feature survey. Then at 11, Bree and Brian will be discussing our large feature survey. Then we'll break for lunch at noon. We will return at 1 p.m. where we'll be covering standardized financials with AI and dashboards with Ryan Kim, Connor McKenna, and Susan Halloran. And our final session for the day is at 2:45, and we'll be covering agency success stories, insights, demos, and collaborative discussions. All right, so let's get started with today's session. All right, so today we're going to delve a little deeper into feature previews and small medium survey results. Yesterday we covered the process of feature previews, and today I'm going to focus a little bit on some progress. We're also going to highlight a couple of preview docs that haven't been posted yet. We wanted to discuss these in person because they are relatively large and we want to get a lot of feedback for these items. It's the unit level file reviews and unit sampling. And then we will get into small and medium survey results with Brian once we cover those items. All right, this is us. Okay, so feature modification updates. So this is a little progress report of some of those feature previews that we completed from last year. So this is a little bit of the things in 2024 that we completed outside of the user group items. And then the things that we've completed so far in Q1 and Q2 of this year, which some are regulatory items, and then some were some leftover user group items from last year. So we've completed quite a bit so far this year, and then we still have more to come later this year. So there's a couple of feature previews not yet complete. So there's a compliance audit module update where we're going to add follow-ups functionality that's still out there. That's completed. It's been reviewed. There's been feedback on it from you guys. The deadline is passed. So now it's kind of in that stage where we're waiting for development. I think this item is also on the survey. So it will also need to garnish enough interest to really go through the development process. So that's one thing to note on that one. And then the feature previews that are coming soon. Actually, none of these are ready for review, but they will be after this conference. The unit level file reviews, which we'll be talking about, the unit sampling requirements, and then a portfolio properties group, which we've talked to a couple of people about. And that's basically kind of reworking the property associations functionality. And then we have a couple of items that are not moving forward. I've put comments on these. The compliance audit rename. This effort is substantial, and it would actually be easier and better for us to just create a new module. It requires changing database names, which, if you guys remember the TC and dev dates stuff, that was not fun. And then we also have the edit dev property should not automatically set fields to 0. The request came in. It was actually a Smart Docs issue, and we found a solution within Smart Docs to fix it. So that's why that's not moving forward. If you have any questions on any of these, please let us know. Okay, so now we're going to get into the real fun stuff, and this is going to require a little bit of discussion. I'm going to go over our design so far for unit level file reviews. This request is sort of evolving. Initially, we received a request to add unit level file reviews, but we've actually received further enhancement suggestions to make these reviews more robust. Things like incorporating tenant event data, adding unit sampling, and some other reporting. So I'm going to walk through kind of the high level changes that we've got on this initial request, And then we want to open up for discussion, kind of discuss what we've got for this first phase, and then some of the additional items that we have for future requests. Okay, so this is these are mock-ups. It doesn't exist yet. So basically this is a new unit files review tab, and it'll be in the compliance audit module. So it's a brand new tab, and basically you would add your units that you would do your file reviews on. So this is a pretty basic list page. If you hit add unit, you'll get this modal, which if you use inspections, this should look familiar. I copied it and we will use it basically kind of like a shared modal, and you'll be able to select your units that you're doing file reviews on. We have some kind of sampling calculations at the top there, like as you select it, you know, how many units you're, what percentage of units, how many low income units, how many LIHTC, how many home, that kind of stuff, just informational. That's how you would select your units. If you're familiar with this, you select the unit, you hit save, and then that unit is added. You actually have to go in and delete if you need to delete, versus coming here, you can't uncheck it once you've checked it. So that is one thing about this modal. Once you check it on here, it's kind of locked.
Andrea, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So for the, like, we've got the LIHTC and the home units there, or we will have there in this modal, and it's in our inspections modal too. It's the same modal.
Yeah.
If my agency, I have my own agency now, just so that you guys know that. I'm kidding. If my agency chooses to add HTF compliance, will my HTF information automatically appear here? Or how do we know what to do about that?
You're no longer allowed to. Yeah, probably.
Well, and I mean, I guess I would put a question out to everybody. Do you want unit level inspection and file review for HTF?
Yeah.
I assume that you do. That's why I'm bugging this.
Yeah, might as well go.
Right? All the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes.
Also, we have loans. And we want to make sure that that property has our loan, that we have a certain number of units that are also in the mix for unit file reviews.
Yeah, the program wouldn't show anything, right? If it's a loan program, it would just be empty in the program loan. Additional set aside is what we use.
Yeah.
So it would just be empty there.
I think so.
I think so.
Would that be okay, Erica? I mean, we don't have any splits that are some LIHTC, some loans, right? Where you like would want to have units that said LIHTC and units that had nothing, which would be the loan.
We do. We do. We have properties that have LIHTC units and then non-LIHTC units are state funded.
But they were still tagged low income, we would know.
Yeah, you would
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Like trumps, let me be clear.
Okay.
So our loan programs, we do have some limits that may be at 50 and 60. Usually they're at 80 and up to 150%, right? But our unit sampling, you know, our procedures require we have a good mix across all of the programs that we
Okay,
want.
that makes sense. Okay, so if those are in low income, that should cover it. But then the follow-on question to that is, do you have a property where you've got, and I think I know the answer for some people, more than one loan? And is it okay if they're all lumped together in that low income category? Or do you have properties, and I think I know the answer, but do you have properties where you have a loan or some loans and then another set aside? And a same question, is it okay if they're all grouped in the low income group?
Short answer is probably,
Okay,
but that would be an exception.
okay,
And so
okay.
not one that would require add, you know, the addition.
So I think we're okay on that.
And there's probably more discussion around when we get to the sampling slides.
Oh,
too,
yeah.
The different programs and how that'll work.
That'll shed more light.
Yes,
Okay.
I think so.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. But back to my original question. If I choose to use housing trust fund compliance, I can have it here in file reviews and inspections. Yes,
For the calculation of the bond.
yeah.
Kind of. We'll have to talk about. that.
yeah. We have to talk about the program
Yeah,
and how they're assigned to the units.
Okay,
And that's coming
Okay.
up kind of in our unit sampling
okay,
piece, I think.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
so, yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, because we're gonna have to discuss something.
okay, okay.
But yeah, we can, I mean, you can add HTF there. If it's on the unit, then we can display it there.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Maybe I'm just catching up to you guys, but.
Oh, no worries. You're ahead of us.
Sorry.
So this would be, once you've added those units, then you go and click into it. I left this pretty basic. It's just got a status and a results, a comments and a findings. If you have any suggestions on some further data that would be required within this screen, we would need to know what those data points are. If they're required elements or if they're not, things like that. So that would be something that the whole user group would have to agree on what's required versus what's not. But we will add UDFs obviously to this module as well. So then you can also create your own.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
I'm getting an authorization. Okay, let's go. I think for findings that we would want to be able to do more than one,
Yes.
right? So the question then is, you know, when we have where we can do more than one, it's like that table list that we see, we call that a grid. So that's what we would ask for here, is if we could do that, so that we could have more than one finding per unit. And again, both on file review and inspection.
Or on the unit, you clicked into a unit,
Mhm.
sorry, I'm thinking this out loud. You
Yeah.
clicked into a unit in order to get here.
Yeah.
And you have comments and findings. You would say you want a grid buried in here that has all the findings.
For this unit,
I mean, we could probably do a tab too.
or yeah, tab.
And are we gonna
That has a
have this be
grid.
smart dockable, or are they gonna always be logging into ProLinkHFA when they're on the,
I don't.
Compliance audits has smart docs.
yes?
So I think
So theoretically it could.
yeah, I think it would work.
It'd be hard to smart docs multiple rows of findings, though,
Sequences, right?
yeah.
Theoretically.
theoretically. And is this gonna then go to default?
So it depends on, like, I guess, when you're entering findings, if you're just entering finding one, finding two, and it's not a templated, you know, of like, here's 100 things that I look at when I do a file review, that gets a little trickier with Smart Doc.
But when it's kind of more, I don't want to say random,
Freeform.
but freeform, yeah. That will be easier, smart docs wise.
There's standard stuff that we look at, the addendums, the income.
And you could enforce that with your smart doc, right? Because your smart doc would be your template, which guides your file review person.
And then when we send the smart doc, it wouldn't just be like all lumped together. It would be, the findings would be separated.
Yeah,
Okay.
right? That's what we're asking.
Yeah.
I'm asking on your behalf. You're welcome. I think that you would need that. I feel like somebody
Thank you.
talked
Yeah.
about that yesterday.
Either that or a much bigger box. I mean, you're gonna.
It
Build one.
expands.
Yeah. Yeah, I
But
wanna
I
see it.
think,
I know.
you know, if we think about like data view,
Yeah,
right?
very hard to pull it.
Right, you would want those findings to be able to be a little more separate for the data view, I think.
Well, and for readability on the screen as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you,
I mean,
because so you're gonna build follow-ups off the findings, then you really need to tie them together.
Yeah, and it would be easier if they were truly a grid.
Because you could put in a finding and say, this one needs a follow-up,
Mhm.
whereas this one does not.
Right, right. And then, and also, again, for the data view, in terms of like searching and filtering, you know, if you've got the separate findings,
Could we
you
have
can go
finding
after
type?
what you're looking for easier.
We have finding type first, not just a grid of findings, but say what kind of finding it is.
Yeah,
Like, is it pick list?
Category or something
That we
maybe?
can maintain, so if Maryland has a set of things that they check, and they can say the finding is based on one of these things that
Yeah.
they're supposed to check.
Yeah.
And maybe.
What is it
difference
called
that.
in the inception? Category? Or that's one level up.
Yeah, there's like a lot of,
Groups,
there's categories, groups, classification.
Like maybe make it sort of the same, at least name, so it all sort of flows-ish.
but just have it be like a required field when you create a finding, what kind of finding it is.
Yeah.
That way we could, you were saying for data views, we could say, well, how many times do we find this finding?
This kind, right,
And this kind of,
right.
right, or we're by person, like how many times did
This person.
Shelley ever find this problem, like
Yeah.
is she been looking?
How many times do I find this with this management
That's
company?
true.
Right?
Yeah, and we could do a non-system pick list, but we'd have to have one system pick list value if it's
Other.
required.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what we would do.
Yeah.
That's how we would design it. Other would be your system pick list value, so there'd be one there that you could pick if you didn't set anything up. And then you could set up and customize it to your agency.
And make them active or inactive if things.
Right, yep,
Mhm.
exactly.
And maintain history. Yeah. Is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
So that the unit review results will be the overall results, right? Because you have all the. findings.
Right, it's kind of like in progress or complete or whatever.
I thought that was status.
Oh, I don't know, whatever, one of them. Status,
Status makes sense in progress, complete, whatever, but
Yeah.
results would probably be satisfactory.
oh yeah,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
which would probably also be a pick list that you'd want to customize. Or would you want to
It
use
is-
like the
it's-
standard?
Oh,
I think It's a
yes.
standard, but we can add to it.
Yeah, you could do
I
a non,
think,
yeah, and if it stays a non-required field, just do the system pick list values as those standard values and
And
then,
then you-
yeah, and then you guys could customize for the others.
I always like the option to custom.
I think mostly I have to look at everything, but I think mostly everybody's sticking to that kind of standard. You know what I mean? Unsatisfactory that stuff, which aligns with your inspection.
So when you go back on your unit grid, is it gonna tell us our review status on our? No, it did, right? Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All good feedback.
This is part of why we're here, is to discuss these things with everybody. Because it's a lot easier when everybody's together.
No, yet, but I'll take suggestions.
State of Kelly.
I feel like that'd be a lot of responsibility. I might rethink it.
The population of one.
Right. Well, my kids are gonna want to be in it though. Then
So you can
so-
visit, tourism's allowed.
good point. And there's fees when there's tourism. And Sean, go ahead. Do you have a question?
No, you just need to use a microphone.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was yelling loud enough.
So if-
I'm done now.
I just, my hearing is my hearing.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I'm looking at the header. There's something called audit type, but it's empty. What's the thought behind that? Am I really not loud enough? Okay, I can hold it.
I can hear you.
So you don't have to shout.
Oh, I think that's
Shouting, that's just.
like in the compliance audits, that's the header. I don't know what that is, but that's from this page, like it's there. Do you know what it is?
Like
Kelly?
the standard header, you mean?
Yes, it's the standard header. But I don't know what it is.
And at the bottom, the audit types are like tech, lender, other, right? At the bottom.
We'll track it down.
A random question. This is regarding tenant file review. So it's indicating the unit that in this particular review, you're reviewing tenant file. Would it make sense to indicate the household name of the file you're looking at and that it's a file review status of the unit review?
Yes. Did you hear that?
Yeah, so like some of the terminology in here. So would we add would we add household name, as like just a field actually on the screen?
I do,
Yeah.
for this one, like you're looking at your one household in that unit. So who's the
Yeah.
household
Who
in
is
that
it?
name? You're looking at that tenant's household
We-
file, not really looking at the unit.
But don't,
Right.
so Kimber, don't you look at, if it had a move in or a move out in the time frame, would you look at both households? Or do you only look at the current household? Because I mean, you only look at the current one? Okay.
I rather look at the current.
Current.
Is that possible?
We do our,
Like,
it would make sense if it said tenant unit or tenant file review.
So can you pull the current tenant's name into unit 101? The current household, head of household name? What if what if it's been moved out? Because the tenant would not be there anymore, would you just not look at that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's for us in Maryland, it's a snapshot in time. So I'm looking at a file today.
Uh-huh.
I'm looking at the resident that is in there today.
Okay,
what if they moved out yesterday?
I'm not,
Then you won't look
No.
at that one, you'll move on to a different one.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
that makes it easier because then you can just always pick the current head of household.
Because at that point, it's a
Last
big-
name, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that'll help you too in sampling. Because if you don't have a head of household, you know you gotta move out, move on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, just don't bother with that one. So that'll help.
So if it says no head of household, you're gonna say vacant.
Yeah, I just had a thought and then I forgot.
Oh.
If so this would only work though if you're importing your tenant events like monthly to pull the most recent one, otherwise it go back to whatever the last year was, right? If we're trying to pull who's in that unit today. So,
Would it be possible to like, because we're not doing that, would it be possible to just like manually populate
the name.
the name?
Yeah.
Have it sample the unit number and then this is the,
When you
this is
do
the
it
name
for
of the person.
review, just type in the name. Yeah. Though maybe it's a nice thing to pull it if we have
Have it, and then-
it can be like, well, here's what we know, but you can type in your own name.
Might also be something that the state can require leading up to the audit. And
There you go.
we want your rent roll, you
Yeah.
need to give it
Yep.
a
That's a good
fresh
point.
XML,
That's a good,
all of that.
Part of your task.
So we have current information.
because we asked
Yes.
for rent roll,
There you go.
anyway,
Anyways,
so-
right? Okay, so let's think for a minute though about timing wise, Brian. The updates for XML import. We're doing that for sure, question mark.
The one we talked about yesterday.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do we know timing wise how this and that? Like, it'd be better if XML was ahead of this a little bit to
Yeah.
allow for that.
I think we're
update.
trying to get both done by the end of the year. So
So that works. That would be okay then. Okay. Okay. So we hit everybody's questions. We got yours. I think. Okay.
Okay. So I think some people have already talked about this, but some of the further requests we've had is bringing in tenant data. And so, I think we've talked a little bit about that. Some doing, unit sampling. So a little further, robust unit sampling with actually different calculations and a utility that will help trigger and make sure that you meet unit sampling requirements. File review inspection items. So it's kind of a checklist of everything you need to check on your file reviews, and then some more robust reporting from file reviews. Those are kind of the additional requests we've received to kind of further enhance this module.
Can I ask? Oh, go ahead, you go first.
Would that include follow-ups? Follow-ups was an option. We talked about the past.
Right, that one's pending development, right?
So you're saying that if it didn't get approved for development, it's not considered as part of this?
I don't know, would we just
What's?
put it together?
Follow-up, so
Follow-up.
follow-up option was a different conversation we had.
Yeah, that was a separate, we've had kind of this evolving request that kind of started with, we need unit level file reviews, we need follow-ups, and then we need some more robust. So it's kind of like done this weird kind of circle.
Right.
So we have a preview doc for the follow-ups because that's easy to just add to the module,
Right.
right? And that's out there, ready for development. But then we have some of these further, so maybe we would just look into combining it all.
Well, the reason I'm asking is having just blanket follow-ups is not gonna be as useful if we have now unit findings, because we'd want to tie the two together. Right, you wouldn't want to have just
Mhm.
follow-up records for the audit and not have it relate back to the findings that we're following up on.
So you think that the preview doc that's out there is kind of obsolete and we need to rework it?
I don't know, guys, would you want a follow-up that's completely disconnected from your findings?
No.
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense. If we're
So
getting
that-
findings.
So then that feature preview that's out there is kind of obsolete.
So
I
if you
think
would
so.
want, if signature was missing, the follow-up would be to have a signature from the household, adults over 18. But if they're missing the student certification entirely, then as a follow-up, you're gonna want the property to provide you with a copy of the student certification. And the two are unrelated, signatures versus an actual document.
So if you'd had multiple findings on that unit, and finding one was the signature, and that goes to follow-up one, and finding two was a missing document, and that goes to follow-up two.
Yeah.
Right, so if each finding could create a follow-up.
Multiple follow-ups on a finding, or just like a field on the finding that's your follow-up date and information?
Do you want multiple follow-ups on the same finding?
No,
No.
that'd get confusing.
So when you showed your unit grid of all the units that were there, and you had your review status. You had your review status and your results, then you could have follow-up needed, follow-up date, or whatever you wanted on the end. So, and as long as we could do a data view that looked for follow-ups missing. Right?
Yeah.
You guys probably would need follow-up status or notes about the follow-up on the actual record, on the finding records.
Yeah.
Is it possible when you picked units to tell me, obviously this isn't gonna work right away, but in the future, to tell me if those units had been selected in a previous audit? Since we're capturing the units that are selected.
Anything's possible. It's the when.
Okay.
You know what I mean, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's the when.
Everything's impossible with time and money, I
Right.
know.
And will we be able to generate a report to the management company from this?
I mean, I think that's part of the request is to also have additional reporting. So like so we would kind of do all these requests first and then build reporting off of like all the, like what you would need. So it sounds like you might need some findings reporting specifically.
Would it be? Is it okay to kind of follow the idea of like that inspection report, like the kind of the layout and whatnot? It feels like it would make it easy for everybody if that was the route that we went.
I think so.
Right? Like
I
it's
think
all-
so. Yeah, it like had some continuity.
Right?
Because right now, our our file management review and our physical inspection reports look completely different,
Different, right?
when they go out, so.
Which I think is, like, they can deal with it, but it'd just be easier if they were sort of.
It would look more
Similar,
professional, I think.
Yeah, it'd probably be helpful to get some examples of that report that you currently have today. And then one thought I was thinking about on the follow-ups at the compliance audit level, do you ever have, when you go out looking at like how they perform management of the property or other things at
We-
the
we
unit
look
level
at
that
that.
would be maybe at that higher level?
We do look at that. In fact, we've given, I think Jennifer provided a list of all like the checklist that we
Yes,
go through. It's like, you know, are you?
I just saw that the other day.
Yeah, you know, are the fair housing, it was, you know, is your fair housing documentation in the management, you know, is the, you know, what are your maintenance procedures, like all of that.
I'll get that sample to you.
I think they sent it in an
Yeah,
Excel. file.
yeah. Yep, I just looked at it yesterday. I choose. Or no, I'm lying too, it was Monday. So, yeah.
So, right now we're using a Word document for the tenant file reviews. We do have a pre-audit document that we sent out to the property, lots of questions with the requirements and things that they're supposed to meet. The functionality that we look for would probably be in a smart docs. For us to be able to have the flexibility of typing what we need to type and then having it to overlay and update the system when we get back.
That part. I mean, we have sort of right now, but I don't, with these changes, for it to come along.
Well, right now it's only
Yeah.
by year of the audit, so you pick the audit year.
Mhm.
So you'd have to sequence tons of units in order to be available.
Yeah.
And then how would the system, the smart doc know which units you selected? Because normally it would just pull all units.
Right.
So you'd have to do
write
something
map
else.
slots.
So
for-
maybe smart docs, I'm not trying to put us in that corner of using smart docs. I'm just saying that making the unit selection here and typing into each of those records here is not likely something that would happen. Including if you have the functionality on a tablet or something like that. I don't know, I would have to
I
see.
think smart docs is the answer.
You probably have to have a new node that's compliance unit selections, right?
Yeah, and we'd want to map UDFs, so that you
Yeah.
guys can expand whatever things that you want to map.
But Erica, what that means for you is that you might want to go Excel. Because the mapping is easier.
No, that's perfectly
So-
fine. Like, I see this as a good move forward, for having consistency in what the reporting looks like. If we have the UDFs, if we have the flexibility of, crafting it, that we all have standard things that we look for in tenant file reviews. But it would, help with how we communicate with the properties, right? So the standard things of whatever you're finding and being able to identify those things. So I like the direction that this is going in. I see that there's a good use for it for us. I just don't see us using it in the computer. Like if we have to go to desktop, laptop, having to go in each of these records to make the updates in our tenant file reviews.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So probably the way this would work is like that prior screen where you selected the units and then we'll have some unit sampling stuff that we'll be talking about. Like you'd probably use this system at least initially to figure out what units that you're going to review. And then you do it again to your smart docs that you've identified in the smart docs template.
Or you go part of your file inspector checklist.
Yeah,
Or-
that was the functionality that was in the ProLink Inspire. So I liked how you were able to say any 20% would give you,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
just to start with.
Yeah. Okay. We're on the right track, I think.
All right. Any other final thoughts on unit level file reviews? Before we move on to the really fun stuff. I got math for
Really
you.
fun already.
I know.
I'm having a good time.
No, but I have math.
Okay, oh, boy. Here we go. We chased him away.
I can't do this session without BK. I'm kidding.
Listen,
We'll get started.
we'll be okay.
Okay, so unit sampling. So a little bit of background. We introduced a random selection of unit percentages with the Inspire updates. However, after talking further with all of you guys, we've identified some additional complexities in unit sampling. There's a need for thresholds, total unit counts, warnings, error messages when thresholds are not met, and as well as determining program types for units. That program types is going to be an interesting conversation. Is this buzzing again? Okay, good. I thought I heard something, so I just want to make sure. And so we've discovered that this functionality would be beneficial for both the file reviews and for inspections. And this slide is very minimal. It looks very small for how big I think this preview doc is going to be. But basically we would build a unit sampling utility. So if you can imagine ProLinkHFA, the utilities would have another utility where we would go in and you'd be able to lay out your unit sampling requirements. So I don't know if each state has different unit sampling requirements or if you follow like HUD. I think there's some old HUD standard.
Yeah, I think it depends on the programs, you know what I mean?
Right.
The federal programs are gonna be the same, but then state programs could be different
Right.
a little bit, maybe.
Just make her hold it.
Sorry.
So we would have that new utility. We'd have the unit sampling requirements as that. If you imagine that tab where you're selecting your units, there'd be another tab on that modal that you could click that would be informational only, that would pull from your utility to tell you based on your property size, like what's required. It would be drilled down into the property information. So you'd be able to see that live in that modal. And then last is some configs for warnings. So this slide really doesn't do justice to how big this is, but those are kind of the top level enhancements for this.
Would the unit sampling be done once, like
Would it be done once at property setup? Or would you have to do it every year?
So the utility, you would just do one time and you
Okay.
could effective date it. So like right now, if you have unit sampling requirements that are in effect, and then I don't know, 10 years down the road, it changes. We're going to put in some effective dating to where you go into that utility and you could change it if those thresholds ever changed.
So I put in like the effective date of,
Like today or last year or whatever.
yeah.
No, you would start like today or whenever they're effective, and they would just be effective as of now. And then and it goes forward until you have a new effective date.
Okay.
So it's now and to whenever, and then if you do a new effective date, because if you ever did change them, anything that was done prior would be under those old thresholds, and then you would need to have the new requirement samplings going forward.
And that's on the property level, or is it on the,
So this is going to be a global level.
okay,
By we'll get into some screenshots and hopefully it'll make a little more sense.
What level did you say this?
So it's a utility, it'll be global. So then we have a couple of screenshots about like if it's LIHTC or home or HTF or whatever. Oh, I'm sorry.
Specific property,
Maybe I need to stand back.
or specific property.
For units, so it's going to be based on your property size. So like 1 to 100 units, you take like 20% of that is like your minimum sampling requirement. So it's going to be based on property size.
Well, I'm just kind of thinking of I'm kind of thinking, would you able to change, like this sample? If it automatically does a sample size, because sometimes, you've got to be kind of flexible
Yes.
when you're in the field, because when I used to do file reviews, if there was one, if I had and you have to basically just get a count, a certain number. So if I have a folder that's like this big, and then I have the next folder is this big, I'm gonna choose the smaller folder just to get my count. Is that what I mean?
Yeah, so there's gonna be minimums. So I think, let me see. This help. I might skip ahead just to help give you a visual. So, so this would be like if your property was 4 to 50 units, the minimum sample size for 4 to 50 units would be 4 units, right? But then if you had 50, at 20%, what is that? I can't do math. 10?
Sure. I can't do that.
So, if you're doing the percentage, 10 would be greater than 4. So you'd have to do 10. But if you don't enter a percentage in here, we're not going to make that required. And I am skipping a little bit ahead here. We'll get to this. You could just always have the minimum set for that property threshold
So then
on your utility.
So then that's gonna tell you. Hetty, that's gonna tell you, review 10 units and Andrew, you correct me if I'm wrong, but then the system will randomly offer you, here's 10 units that you can do. But you could not, you don't have to choose the 10 units that the system says, here's 10 random units. You could pick the 10 that you want to look at, or it gives you these 10 and you're like, okay, 9 of those are good. And then I'm going to switch this one with the big, huge file to this one that's got the small file.
That's just a question. This seems very big for what it's going to give us. I mean, I don't know who asked for this, but it seems like a lot of expense from the user budget for selecting units. I don't know, is this a big problem? Picking the right units?
Picking enough units.
Picking enough units?
Enough.
I see it as probably data tracking, making sure there's consistency across whoever's doing the inspections. I mean, I know for us it is manual.
Right.
I'm not negating what you said. But it is a manual process. Like, they print it out or they're looking at it on an Excel report of all of the occupancy. There's a highlighter that goes across that this is close to the income limit. So I want to choose that unit. This one has rental subsidy, but it looks weird, just by eyesight.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to pick this unit.
And they will still be able to do that. Right? It's not, you're not going to be forced to use the random sample. But it's there for you if that works for that property or part of it. But it's more about setting the thresholds or the requirements that for this size of property, you've got to inspect this many units. More so than it has to be these particular, it has to be these units, but you've got to hit 10. And it's a pain to calculate that based on what program, and then if you have overlapping and how many do I do, like that. So that's why.
Right, I'm just wondering if anyone would trust that it picked the right and they weren't gonna go and recalculate it.
Our people will probably take something else. They will.
Yeah, because I mean, they won't trust that they'll do it again on their own.
That's a different discussion.
Right, I'm just wondering if if other states are like that.
Right, and then also like, how are you handling multiple building projects? That changes your sample size depending on.
I don't like that question.
And so like.
I don't like that
If you
comment.
can't use it for everything, is it worth it? I guess.
Because it seems like it'll be a big expense for you guys to provide it. And out of all the things
So you kind of jumped ahead of me
Oh, sorry.
because I was gonna bring up kind of towards the end of this, if we're making this too complex and if there's any way to simplify this. Because the design, it is getting bigger and bigger and bigger as we look into this and it's like, oh yeah, this would be great. Oh yeah, this would be great. And it just keeps getting bigger as we continue on. But
Well, and then just one more quick thing. Can you change it based on like how far along the property is? So once we hit extended use, we change our pile sample size. So all of those things. That's another point.
oh yeah, you'd have to change it in the utility, right? You would do new effective dates with different thresholds.
It would be different type of property, so it's not global anymore.
Didn't think
Or
about
the
that.
opposite, go sample up.
Are you-
And we leave that to the hard part.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So we, on a new project, we do 40% for the first review, and then it goes down to 20. You said, and we go down and extended use. Okay. Yeah, and we're the same as far as the random sample. Like we would pick very specific units to make sure, like with different set asides, we want a certain number of those. Like you said, if there's an income that looks close to the limit, yep, I might want to look at that one. So a random sample for us would be beneficial.
And then you have, sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say, but if you, even if you just, if we did the units attached to the audits, we'd be able to get a sum of those units. So it wouldn't be hard for management or anything to say, hey, here's all the audits you did, and here's the sum of how many units you looked at. Did that meet the threshold? Right, if you're doing a percentage of units and do like a review that way, not necessarily start ahead of the whole process. I'm saying there's a way to check if it was done right,
Right,
without having this whole unit sampling function.
but it's manual.
It's managing.
Let Kathleen, I think, has a question.
This may be not related, but with this sampling, would that provide, so I set my thresholds, would it provide like a hard stop in the file review? So say, this property, I needed to pick 9, I picked 8, would it provide a stop for me to not complete the report or not complete the review?
Yeah, to not complete the, sorry, to not complete the compliance review at the very highest level. So like when you're selecting units and as you're selecting units, I think we would provide a warning. And we would do that all by configuration. So some states could turn that on if they wanted to, or not turn it on. And then, so you would know if you didn't pick enough units when you're going through your unit selection. But then if you went and tried to complete the file review at the top level, you would get a warning and you wouldn't be able to complete the review.
That's perfect.
Okay, so just to play devil's advocate, could there just be a field on the property that is number of units that you need to inspect and use that as our check? That could be manually changed when it goes to extended use or any of these other use cases.
So then you do it per property?
Maybe, and then it's just, you set it up once and you've done that configuration. Just throwing that out as a potential option, because this is a lot of infrastructure we're gonna have to build and logic for effective dates and.
Building level instead of property level, because.
No, you need property level, because you have to go across, you know what I mean, all the building, like for LIHTC, right? It's gotta go across all of your buildings.
What about multiple?
You know what I mean?
What about multiple building project? It'd have to be on there too.
Mhm.
Bin level?
I don't know.
Well, and we haven't project level.
Based on the building,
Mhm.
based on the project election. So the single building projects, it would have to be 20% per building. Or 20% per project, I guess, depending, because we have some that they'll group like 3 buildings together as a project and then 2 buildings together as projects. So then that would be 20%
Across the two, right?
between the projects. Yeah.
Right.
So on that multi-building property screen, you put it on there.
Right.
Right.
Between, yeah.
But you could also put it up at the property level for your single building properties. Like if you put something there, I don't know, do you ever mix single building and multi-building project in the same? I mean, that could happen, right?
Yeah, and then we do have some that say it's like 9 buildings, they put 8 together.
Right.
And then 1 separate, so technically the one is
Right.
single building.
So you'd have to stick it at property level to capture the one single building and then put it on the projects in the multi-building project.
So another,
Or could
Consideration.
you build the utility and based on the property size, on the number of units, pull it in and then you be editable and change it?
This is too
does,
hard.
does anybody have projects that have a large enough sample that they actually use the React sample because it's lesser than 20%? Yeah, so we have that too.
Yeah, we do that.
Say that one more time, Kate.
Okay, so if the 20% is greater than what the React sampling would be, we can use the React sampling.
Really?
Yeah, we need to lesser.
Who made that dumb rule?
That's the IRS. It's the IRS thing.
Is that this thing?
Yes, that thing.
I'm
I actually really like the idea of like us entering that at the beginning, like we could just enter that number at the beginning during onboarding.
Per
Someone-
property.
Per property,
Okay.
like someone puts that in, we'll have our QA team double check it, you guys don't have to do the math, but leave it up to us, but then it's still testing against it when you're doing your compliance audit or your inspection to make sure that it's hit that minimum number.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to do the math, Jillian.
So, okay, wait though, I don't understand. Let me ask questions about this. So if we had the threshold at the property or thresholds, right? Because there'd have to be more than one based on the programs.
We need to talk about that, but yeah.
Then we wouldn't need the utility. Is that what we're saying? Okay, so that, if that would work, that'd be a lot smaller. And it feels okay to do it at property on, it's one, well, you know, a couple more fields. It's not like volumes more data that we're asking to record at onboarding, right?
That
So,
still provide a hard stop.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then we still have to think about how do we do, like, for LIHTC, we would have LIHTC and then we would need extended use, like basically sort of like multiples per program, possibly, you know, per property, maybe.
And that's probably.
You're making my head hurt,
I'm
guys.
sorry. Me too.
So I guess we should probably talk about programs next then.
Yeah.
So like if you have a property that has LIHTC and home, do those have different unit samplings that you need to do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if it's fixed or if it's floating on home, how do you know the unit that you're going to file a review on is, if you just look at the person that's currently in there, and that's how you know that, like if they haven't entered their compliance information yet, how do you know that that unit was designated as health?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's either on the
There's not really a rule for file reviews, but for unit selection, you have to look at a minimum of 4 per property or 1 per building. So if you've got an 8 building property and 7 units, and they were clever enough to put 1 in each of 7 buildings, we then have to go into 7 instead of 4. But as far as the file reviews are concerned, I really like to pick move-ins. And
Makes sense.
if it's a unit transfer, I ask them to give me a list of their unit transfers, so I'm not looking at them, because I don't want to look at a move-in from 6 years ago.
Right.
But as far as the physicals and the home, those really stink because there's not a lot of turnover on the home units like there is in LIHTC. So you go into the same household and the same unit 3 or 4 times in a row, and there's nothing we can do about it.
There was an update to the inspection sampling in the 2025
Oh, that's good.
Write that down.
That's great.
To align, I think, with the tax credit, I think it's just 20.
Are you ready?
Like, if you say that
There's,
home and.
Like that, everybody, that-
yeah, I believe there's an update to the sampling requirements for home in 2025.
I think she's right.
How long?
April
I'm
2026.
this session.
Oh, we have till 10:45.
Okay.
I don't think we're getting to BK. Okay, so are we still talking about programs? Was there any other thoughts on programs? Because like our issue is the tenant data that's in ProLinkHFA might not be what's live now as you're doing file reviews, because it's usually last year's data that's been completed. So then if you're doing file reviews like October of 2025 and it's a home, well, you said you don't have a lot of home, like turnover on home units or whatever, but how do you know that like a low income unit didn't flip to a market unit? Like on the LIHTC side. 'Cause it could have been low income for 2024, but then there was some flip flopping and it became a market unit.
Well, with the XML enhancement, they can require that when an inspection and file review are coming, that they update their tenant events.
Right.
So then you know,
Right, which would make this unit selection more accurate.
right? Check.
Okay, check.
Done.
What was the other thing we were going to talk about? Did you have it? It was programs and
I mean, pretty much, I think that I think it was the fixed floating, and just if the knowledge of our data is like a year out of date, then, you know, that modal and all stuff is going to be calculating based on what we last knew about the minute.
The model be smart and just tell you the date of the tenant data that it's looking at, and then at least you know. I'm looking at data that's 1 week old, or I'm looking at data that's 1 year old. You know, something in that. You know. I mean, we have the information, but what's the ramification, right? Is it a huge performance hit? Do you really care? I mean, so here's what I think, and tell me if I'm wrong. You know, when you're scheduling the inspection or the file review, you're going to tell them 30 days ahead, right? This is happening. Update your information. And then you are not going to create your list of units until they give you that updated information, I think is how you want to do it. And it's probably how you're doing it today, but it's kind of manual, I think. So then maybe we don't care about the date as much.
Maybe get on microphones. So if we go back to kind of the thought of putting the number, the threshold that you need per property, sounds like that worked in some use cases, not in others. Should it really be maybe at the program level? So that you could do it for LIHTC or home or different programs? Or should we just have home field at the property level for the home and LIHTC? Anyone has thoughts on that?
Do you think it makes sense to incorporate the program level, because you may have a lender inspection or compliance audit that you need to do 1 year? That's different sample size for us. So if you tied it to the program, then depending on what you're seeing it for that year, you would know the sample size. that you could add in the home.
And then that way you could have layering if you need. Can we just not do file reviews anymore? It's so hard. I don't want to.
It sounds like we might have simplified it some,
I think we could get rid of the utility, it sounds like.
and the math, which, that's fine. I think B-Dub's fine with that too.
Anyone have any other final thoughts on file reviews or sampling size?
No, but let's talk about where do we go from here. So do we create design and
Yes, I think we'll-
screenshots and so that we can sort of put
We'll
on
kind of do
some
an updated preview doc and we'll kind of, get back together, do some brainstorming and then we'll post that out there and then see what kinds of this we got, see if we have anything that we need to add or if we missed, see if it makes sense. We might get into it and be like, oh, wait, there's an iceberg here we didn't realize, so we'll just have to take a look.
And if that happens, we'll all have to talk on meetings.
You guys can come back.
I'm gonna skip ahead, but BK, I think that's it. Unless there's any other thoughts on this one, then it's small, medium. I'm gonna
Okay.
get
Ready?
to your area.
We can. Can do.
Actually,
What was it, Marty?
This is true. Working. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the small medium survey that we sent out. And we actually got 77 responses to this survey. So this is probably the most feedback we've ever got on any list that we've put out. So really appreciate all that information and all your feedback, and definitely appreciate anyone that leaves comments. Those are super helpful to us if you kind of let us know if this item is something that is good for your agency, or this item is something that might hinder your agency. But these are, the list that we're going to try to review today. We'll see how many of these we can get through. Some of these might be deeper than other ones, so we'll just have to take a look. But the first one we're going to dive into is in ProLinkHFA. This is improving compliance evaluation exception, engine exception messages for additional set-asides. So that's a mouthful. I know a lot of people have requested this one. Some of the feedback that we got, this one is basically trying to display more granular messages. Andrea will review this one here in a minute, but I think it's like one big exception block message that shows up. And so we have some people that were interested. They like the idea it would help evaluating tenant events, and currently it's just not as useful. And so they just kind of override that exception. So do you want me to go to the next slide, Andrea, or how do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, I think so. I think the biggest request was we have that big message that's not really helpful. So to be more granular, adding income threshold exception messages and rent threshold exception messages, similar to what you have on LIHTC. So it's basically say that this unit didn't meet you're under your layer type, so you have to have your AMI. So that's what that would do there. And that's kind of the two pieces. I don't know if there's any other more granular messaging that you'd want other than income and rent, but those are like the first two that I think most people would benefit from. I don't know, I'm gonna look to Katie, I think is one of,
And Jillian.
and Jillian, and Elena's not. Elena took a break.
I think that we wanted to note if it was a recertification or a move-in, because that changes if we would override it or not.
Oh, the event
The
type.
event type would be there.
Okay.
It's not, yeah, it'd be like you'd have it'd flow across, like the tenant event date, the type, and then the household and unit.
Okay. And then I think before we would even want to consider like changing the messaging, I think we need to look at the math and how ProLink is calculating those units, because I think that's a part of the reason that we're overriding. Like, we can figure out the message, but we're not confident that the math is matching. When you say the math is not matching, what do you mean? Like, the agents are counting they're counting different units than you are for the AMI. And
The
so,
additional set.
yeah. Right, because
Makes sense. The way it's built is it's doing the collection of units. And it's going from I don't know if he's back there. You may have to correct me if I'm wrong, but it starts at the lowest level of AMI.
Yes.
And finds all the people that fit in there, just working up from the incomes and puts them in that group and is passed. Then you move up to the next AMI, find the lowest incomes, put those in that group. That's how the engine works.
And as you put somebody in a group, then you can't put them in another group.
Right. They fall out of the lineup. And so that's how the engine works for additional set asides. Because we don't have the whole unit designation piece on additional set asides. So you can't designate which units you want to be in that AMI.
So our understanding is that ProLink looks at the income level. And ProLink doesn't look at the set aside level that is dictated by the owner agent. So there's an assumption that ProLink is making that because you have this income that qualifies you for a 60% unit, you must be a 60% unit. And the fallacy of that is that if you've got a housing choice voucher household and they're qualified for 40, that owner agent is putting it at 60 because they know they're going to get the balance of the rent paid by the housing choice voucher, which throws this whole discussion about additional set-asides, out the window. We recognize that ProLink is looking at the federal standards, the federal minimum set-aside, and really not acknowledging how the owner agent is playing the game, I guess.
Right. And when you say, you mean the place where they put in the tenant portal, their lowest, was it most restrictive income level?
I believe so.
I think that's where they have to put it.
But I don't think we use any of the owner agent provided data.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
It's informational only.
Yeah. Which is kind of a debate, like that's partially like them telling you that it's a good person to be in that unit. I don't know. We were, I think, trying to avoid that. But maybe it doesn't handle this other scenario we're just talking about.
But usually when there's like an additional, so what I've seen is when there's an additional set aside or AMI that's higher than a traditional light tech AMI, there's in the tenant event, there's something that says additional. That's where the actual AMI that is coded in their system resides. Like, for example, if there's a unit that's like 90% AMI, typically you'll see a compliance exception and say this is over the rent. But when you go click into the unit, you notice that it's not a 60%, it's a 90%. So that's why it was getting flagged. So we would just kind of override it, because when we go into the additional tab, that's where they have the actual AMI for that unit. So maybe you can check that if they have an AMI that's other than the traditional set aside, you can check that as well to check if it's over rent or over income based on that additional. Do you know what I mean? There's an additional in the there's a tab that has additional set aside where they have more information, where they say this unit is actually an 80% unit. So maybe you
Most-
can,
Most restrictive.
yeah,
that
so maybe
field,
you
yeah.
should, maybe you can check against that. And then if it satisfies that, then you can ignore that compliance exception.
Yeah, and that's the same field that's in the tenant portal. Okay. Yeah.
think that this could be a nice non update. that
Oh, yeah.
would be a required field.
Yeah, how would we implement this with NAMAs? So,
Most restrictive is the anonymous, but I don't think it's required.
Probably.
that's the field that's from the owner agent
Mhm.
of what they think it is, right?
Right.
I mean, I guess that could be a configuration option to allow the engine to use that value that's being passed in the NAMA import from the owner agent.
Yeah.
Is that who here would like that idea? Who here would not like that idea?
So raise your hand really high if you like it, so we can
Well, when they
see.
don't provide them.
Well, it'd probably still then trigger the exception like we do today.
No, yeah. Maybe that's the.
Yeah.
You missed it all.
Well,
That's it. She just said, raise your hand if you like it. I'm not-
I think if you're gonna use it, then you're gonna have a configuration to make it be required, so they can't get through validation unless they enter that field.
It'd have to be a missing requirement.
Yeah,
So you might have a bunch of tenant events with a missing requirement. If you don't
Yeah.
enter that.
Is that field enterable though in the form if you're doing a manual upload?
yes, it is, it's that,
I think it is a configuration you have to turn on for your own agents though.
oh, yeah, maybe.
Make sure that that information is displayed.
And it's in the XML right
It's in
now, it's just
XML,
not
it's not
required.
required. And so, yeah, that's one of those tricky ones where they do an import and then they think everything's good and then they validate and then we tell them, nope, sorry, you're missing an extra field. And so we have got some feedback from the property management software companies that we're not following NAMA standards when we apply additional requirements on top of the import. So this could be a use case maybe for requiring that field is in the next version of NAMA or something.
So then what we're saying is then you use that field to determine. So then we're saying the compliance engine would use that field to determine what AMI band that unit goes into.
Right, that's how you designate your unit. For additional set aside. How we do it.
Yeah.
That's how it would go in the collection. Did you get that, Vito?
Is it done yet? Okay, hurry up.
Like everything. So it's like already built out.
It is, like, it's literally the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Minus some of the others.
And does this work for fixed and floating
I think
configurations?
so.
I guess it would just be whatever they send you is like, well, that's what it's been designated as. And
Uh-huh.
maybe it moved to, it used to be unit 101, now it's unit 102. So,
Okay, that would work. And if I think it would work. I don't think it affects. It'll work. That's my answer.
is there anything that like an owner agent would do to game the system by us just using the data that they're providing? Like, is there any concerns about that or any other additional checks that we should be doing?
They could always find a way to game the system.
Yeah.
It's not really-
I just wonder if there's like some kind of like, is this, actually a real seeming compliance review based on the data we've seen? Like should we still do our current testing and that could be something that you could always take a look at to see, well, here's what the kind of system would say if you did that from the bottom up group. And then another way could be, but you could still just use theirs, but you could compare them, or I don't know, I'm just kind of throwing out an idea.
Just how it's set up, that where the building's supposed to have, and then, you know, it can, if it fits something, then it can check the data that the owner agent put in. Verify
Yeah.
that they've changed the level for that. I think that's what I was thinking about when it was first mentioned, but that's more, it's a lot easier to say, oh, you
Yeah.
just want to set
It's a lot easier just to use the other value, but
Right.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning, but the first line is what it does now, right?
Right.
And then we're saying we wanted to actually tell us more about those units.
Right.
Well, and now we're saying,
Well, we've rewritten additional set asides and how it works. How you were not.
yeah. Yes, that.
Is anybody using this tab right now and like sending out violations based on?
We want to, right?
We are, it's a mess. So,
No,
I
we
mean,
need
we
to
send
hear
it
that.
out and then the fix or the response is the rent roll telling us, these are the ones we say are 40%, these are the ones we say are 50%. And then we look at each individual one and say, yep, that household income and rent is below that limit. So I mean, this is a helpful, I guess, starting point to say, okay,
There might be a problem.
yeah, we've looked, these are the ones that don't meet. But the issue is, yeah, it's picking the units that aren't necessarily what the owner
What
agent
they-
is saying for the set asides.
So I think what you guys are saying is you want the owner to say, these are the units.
Yes.
Yes.
There's a
And
feature request
then-
like 6 years ago. I think I put in about this and started this conversation because we need to know that they are saying at move-in, this household was 40%, their income and rent, because that's the other piece. It feels like when the engine runs, is it saying the same unit is compliant for both the income and the rent at the 40% level?
Well, it depends on how you configured the additional set aside.
Right.
Right,
So-
if you did it the income and
And rent.
rent, then both have to pass.
Yes, and
If
that's
you
how we
do
have it set.
income.
Yeah.
And then a rent, then they're separate from each other, like one or, you know.
Yeah. And I think the
mutually
other thing
exclusive.
that's always questioned, which you mentioned, is it the move-in income or is it their most recent recert? And is it picking those units as meeting the set aside? Because we want to know from move-in.
Well, isn't that why we said that we wanted it to tell us the event type? So
Yeah,
if it's recent, we assume it caught it back when it moved in. But if it's move-in, then we know it's a problem.
Mhm.
Unless you have a recert requirement, which I think some states said they did have. Like they had to still recert at a certain level.
mhm.
We don't test income on research, is that right?
We do, but only to see if we need to trigger next available.
But I
unit.
thought you checked it on here all the time.
I don't think on additional set asides, that's the line.
Oh, yeah,
But I thought on additional set aside, you always check to see if the income and rent matched the
yes,
set aside, regardless of what type of
yes,
unit type it was.
yes,
Or-
regardless of the event.
Right.
Yeah.
But aren't in the engine, isn't doesn't it check the recert against the 140% of the,
For LIHTC,
yeah,
Yeah.
for light.
Yeah.
Okay, so it does.
it does that for LIHTC, yeah. But for additional set aside, it's just checking either the income or the rent or both, depending on how you have the additional set aside configured.
But not 140% of that.
Right, no,
We actually needed to test at research too, you know, because if it doesn't have home or LIHTC, if it's just state funding and they're over income,
You didn't know.
yeah, because then they can be issued a notice to vacate
Okay.
for 24 months. So, I mean, obviously we can't deal with the federal programs, but if it's just state, you know,
Okay. We don't do that. We don't ever keep them out, but
We're horrible.
So do you, Katie, do you guys use the income designations? Like tell the owner tells you what they think it is?
When there's an exception,
So you don't actually look at it
unless it shows that it's not meeting, then we ask for the rent roll and they tell us these are the ones.
Okay.
And then we look at it. Okay. Yep.
And then do you go and just override those exceptions? Nope, we have another question.
When you're testing for home at recertification, are you testing against the 80% AMI for over income? Because that's the threshold for at recert. And I think we had some exceptions come up this year that if it exceeded the high home of 60%, it was not in compliance, but at annual, that next available, it's not the 140 for home, it's 80%.
Right,
I'm not sure that it's testing that.
it should be,
Okay.
but if you see that it doesn't tell us, because we think it is.
Okay.
I think it is.
I think that it is.
Yeah, there were the initial 50 and then it switches.
Yeah. Let's don't do compliance anymore. It's hard.
You're saying that about everything now.
I know. I'm taking the lazy way out today.
Well, I think this has been good feedback. I mean, it sounds like using that owner provided value might make it so that, you know, it's actually, I guess then the only time it would ever fail is if they didn't put the right number in for their income and rent. So if their data was bad, right? So. No, the only time you get an exception.
They were the over income and they
Yeah.
accidentally.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was gonna be my question, but like, could they, I'm scared to ask you this question, but I'm gonna ask it. Could they say, okay, this is the owner, their, or manager, whatever they are. They put in, this is a 40% AMI unit, and then they just put in an income number? Well, they have to have the documentation to back that up, right? Okay, so we're good. Okay. That's
Which
fine.
kind of goes back to that sampling thing. We pick certain,
Yes,
I mean,
okay,
if they're saying
Yeah.
they're 40%, then we might pick a couple of those and,
gotcha.
yeah, so it
Okay.
kind of drives that.
Okay, so that's kind
Okay.
of, that's the audit check. 'Cause-
So they could try to put in the number that would meet, but you're gonna ultimately look at it. You know, I'm just trying to think of ways they could try to wriggle around it. And not that everybody would, because I don't think, but sometimes maybe you have some bad actors.
So if you use that value, what if they don't fill in that value, what'll happen?
Same requirement.
Huh?
It'd be a missing requirement
For the,
for the additional satisfied. For each, and eventually you don't have to. Work. So,
But you can turn this on and off, you
well, I
know?
know, but not by property, it's all for everybody or all for. So if I have a property that has a software that's not set up to send that right. I guess I'm just wondering, maybe those should just error out.
Well, maybe
Instead of
we,
missing a requirement, they just show up on here as no value.
or
The other
Yeah.
exception.
Yeah, that way if we know the particular property has whatever issue, we
Mhm.
just say, well, we have to manually review those, but we're gonna override it.
Is that too late though? In the, do you know what I'm saying?
Missing requirements for something that. Everybody, even if it's not. I don't know.
I want it to be a a required deal.
Yeah, NAMA.
We can ask.
Then they have to use it.
Could be an option in NAMA that it's required for that property. I guess, right? It's just a flag at the high level and it could be turned on or off as part of the NAMA as opposed to just saying it has to be filled out for every unit. I don't know, do they fill out that information just if it's a LIHTC property too? The owner designated,
Yes, I think so.
okay.
We
So
usually
maybe
have
it could be-
additional set aside on top of that for the advanced stuff.
Okay. So yeah, we could just make that a required, maybe just that individual field and the schema is required.
So then, though, say this, so if we do that, it would be like the next version, right, of
Version 9.
version 9, which means your properties have to upgrade to that version. And Katie, I'm kind of looking at you because I know there was a point in time, and I'm sure you're not the only one, where you had properties that were using very, very, very old versions of XML. And is that still the case? And do you see where I'm like, is it this gonna blow up your people? And not just yours, right? Like there's others who, you know, I think they have to pay, I believe, right? The software vendor to get the upgraded version. What are we doing wrong? Anyways, and so that's why they are not doing it. I don't know if that would be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a handful that are using really old versions, but they know that, they know. They kind of, when they reach out, they're like, we know we're using this really old version. And so they kind of realize like, there's issues with that. And I mean,
And they just have to deal with it.
I mean, they'd be able to import version 8 and below, and then they'd have to go do the validation, and they'd have missing field that they'd have to go manually fill out.
Yeah.
And that's what they do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You guys got all those notes, right?
It's all there.
Okay. All right. How much time do we have left? Okay.
We're at 1 out of 10.
Making lots of progress. Okay, this one will be really fast, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay, so the next item on the list was in ProLinkHFA, add permanent funding sources to portfolio property. Currently, construction and permanent funding sources are tracked on dev deals, so this feature would display permanent funding sources on the portfolio property. A couple of people were interested in this. It's helpful to determine financial reporting date for management owners. Critical features since the sources during construction and permanent are often different. So kind of a lot of questions on this one, a lot of different ways that we could approach this. I guess the first question is, and I'm just throwing this out there for anybody to answer. What is the main purpose of showing the permanent funding sources on portfolio property? Is it to understand the programs? Is it to understand other types of requirements based on the loan type or whatever? So what, does anyone have any kind of just general thoughts on how this would be beneficial?
I think
So we're not really using it for our funding or financing right now, but what we find is once the property has moved to monitoring, so it's been placed in service for a couple of years, we don't ever go back and look at TCA or debt. Like that's done, it's over with. So if there is something on the deal that you want to be looking at and keeping track of as you're moving forward, it needs to be on portfolio property.
Right. And is that just, and like, how would you use that as an asset manager? Like when you're doing the,
Well, they may
monitoring.
have different requirements. So like if the deal has CMF, then we need to be looking at for those extra 50% units.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
It wasn't my suggestion, but I can say from my perspective that it would be good to have that to show because I have to go into loan documents to determine whether or not there's Rhode Island housing funding in some of these developments, and that takes some time to do sometimes, like to go into the closing binders and stuff. So if it was already showing up, then I would know which ones we need to collect financials for and monitor.
Right. Okay.
Just put all of that information on the loan screen that's attached to the portfolio property. So we build all of our permanent funding loans there
Right.
with all of the terms, and then that's how we know what we're looking at. And then on the portfolio property, we identify what type of funding is in there. And then it's just right there on the screen.
Yep, that was one of my questions further down the list here. Okay, so any other thoughts or comments on that side? Okay, I guess the other question is then, when you say permanent funding sources, I mean, that sounds like a loan. So is it just loans that are like hard or soft loans that are on the permanent side? Is there any other types of funding sources that you also want to have visible other than something that's a loan?
We would like to.
Grants? Yeah. Okay. And then as far as the permanent sources, do you really just want to see your own sources that you've dispersed, or do you also want to see non-agency funded sources? Or is it primarily just internal?
It would be helpful, I think. We're running into some properties that are in default, and it would be nice to know like how much skin we have in the game, because if we're behind HUD or Capital One, we're never going to be made whole. So it would be sort of nice to know, maybe for like our risk in this deal.
Yeah, lean position
Yeah.
type thing. Yeah.
Would that also affect Catherine's sort of the level of effort you put into bugging, right? If you're not gonna get anything, don't spend a bunch.
It would affect, we defer to HUD or the superior lender at that point. I mean, currently we have situations where the workout team, they're hitting their head against, they're wasting time, honestly. Just going after this property, you're never gonna get anything.
Right.
If HUD's not doing anything, you're not, they're not taking it seriously. The state needs to move on and get money where they can, so.
Yeah. So it could help with that.
I mean, it would be, as a snapshot, as something to look at and say, okay, yeah, I know where I'm behind. Also, we defer in our surplus loan calculation definition, we defer to HUD if they have a 202 or, any HUD funding in front of them. So.
I think Elena had a question, comment.
No, I was just thinking, I know that it's come up before about knowing how much debt service they have.
Yeah,
So if we only track, you were saying only non-agency or only agency funds, we wouldn't really be tracking their debt service. How much payments they really have to make.
Right.
so you'd want to put all. I mean,
Want
it'd
the
be your
option to put all,
option,
yeah.
right? Like you could do it how you want it, however served your needs. And I mean, honestly, if that varied by property based on the funding, that's okay too.
I think I'm jumping ahead. I'll wait for you.
Okay, so we were just started kind of brainstorming, like, okay, well, how could we potentially do this? There's like a few different ways. So we could display sources from Dev or TC deal that are linked to that portfolio property, which sounds like some people may not like that. Exactly. Yeah. You could have multiples. You could have, so that's some of the questions we had is like, okay, so how do we know what a permanent source is? There's not really any key indicator right now on a
There's
dev
not.
funding source. And if you have multiple dev deals attached, so how do we know that? So I guess the question here is there any value in pulling from dev or TC, the funding and financing sections of that page to display this just as kind of like a read-only view on portfolio property? Or should we abandon that idea because that's usually not good data and we really need something more, I don't know, like a
You would
loan?
never want to edit Dev or TC if you find out it's wrong, because that's a done thing.
Yeah.
So if you
Yep.
found out it was wrong and you're only displaying what was from there, you would be stuck with information that was wrong.
Right.
So you have to be able to edit it for whatever the asset manager needs to track.
Yeah. So then that kind of goes to the next one. And it's really kind of what you were saying, Laura, is could we just, I mean, we already have loans linked to a property. I believe you can put lien position and who, if it's your loan or not. So is it really just starting to populate that information, in your system for internal and external sources to understand what the permanent sources look like?
That's on.
Okay.
It's a long list of identifying all per property and building them.
right?
And then, I don't know,
But what do you do when you have more than just loans?
True,
Which
like
is
for the
a lot.
grants, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just a hard or soft loan.
Mhm.
But I think you can attach the loan to like the entity too, so that,
Right.
you can then pull the view and go, in the case of US Bank or whatever, these are all the loans that are out there across your portfolio for that lender or
Right.
whoever you're working with.
Yeah.
So it's on our roadmap to build that in the loan section.
Right, and would that be part of your like onboarding process when you get a new property, like go look at all the closing docs and enter the loans for that
Yeah.
property?
Yeah, when we build the portfolio property, we build the loan stuff out
Right,
as far as what that's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Both, the agency activity funding sources, that's gonna be fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
If you put it up loans, sorry.
So let me, and I do have a screenshot, I think, of
If you
loans.
put it up loans, though, that's gonna affect the sum current balances that display out on their screens. So right now, the current balance that displays is what we have in there for loans.
Oh, is that on
So that's a couple different
risk or
screens.
escrow or something?
Yeah.
Okay,
So we'd have to have a way to indicate which ones are our money versus not
Yeah.
our money.
and that might be a good change to make, or an update.
And then the current balance would only be the sum of our money. Or you show both if everybody wants both values, but
Right.
the current balance for our money is what we've had there for 14 years, whatever.
And does that just add up all the loans,
All the current
some of the
balances
current
of the
balances?
loans that are-
And that's from the import from the
Yeah.
loan servicing system?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, is this an act like an add-on? Or is this active, like, in terms of, your loans, with the loans of a particular project, is this kind of, are people using this?
Yes,
Right now.
loans exist today and people use.
People are using it, and is this kind of, linked to whatever their accounting software, is it linked together?
Some people do have an integration where their loan servicing system feeds loan information into ProLinkHFA.
The APIs. We do
Yeah, so you get, is that monthly that happens?
daily.
Daily? So you're getting
Get
daily
current-
updates on all your
current
loans?
balance on every loan every night. Last payment was made and if any changes in the reserves, it comes over every night so that we can do all the other.
It goes into real time here.
Uh-huh.
Yes, so
And you can
whatever I
see
see here is yesterday's values for our servicing software.
Okay.
If it's, it's only a once a month. It's a lot of work on there.
Yeah, and I believe we have so there's APIs that are available. We also have like an import utility for like Excel. We just get an Excel file that you want to upload once a month to update those values. So,
And I think, Jillian, you all are working on an integration with loan servicing. No? Yes? Yeah.
I just.
Yeah. Maryland is gonna do,
for the state,
an
They-
integration, so.
fine.
So Petty, there's people that you could talk to that have done it and are in it and are gonna do it and
Do you know if any of them use SAP?
I don't think.
nobody
so.
does, just you.
It's really just a mapping of what field you're pulling out of one system and
Yeah.
where it's gonna go when it gets here.
SAP is just an extra challenge above and beyond everything, so.
Do they have?
For people that are using it right now, I was just wondering, because we're trying to get a good system in place for new loans as they come in and whether or not we actually need them to be interlinked, because some of them are like pre-developed, well, more like developer loans, so they're in the name of the developer, not the development, so you don't need all of that in there. Or they might be like smaller type ancillary funding that we don't really need to have in ProLink, so do you guys take all of the loans into the system and then just like highlight which ones you need in there or something?
We only take in the ones that have the HFA number on the record. So if we don't need them, they don't put the HFA number on the record.
And that figure, so just permanent
So if
loans?
the key isn't there, it doesn't have anywhere to go. So if we don't want it in our system, then it just
Oh, I
doesn't have the
see. Yeah.
HFA key.
Is that key coming from the loan servicing?
Yes.
Uh,
So both servicing system has a spot to put the key in. That's how they talk to each other.
And so does your loan servicing, team do that for
Yes.
you? Oh, that's nice.
With these loans too, they're flexible. You can link these loans to portfolio property and also dev deal. So I don't know if there's a use case where you're doing a pre-development loan and you just want that loan linked to the dev deal, and then you don't necessarily have to have it on the permanent side for the portfolio property. But
So we've been using the loans to track our land acquisition program, our pre-development loans. We have there are Article 11Q bond loans that we give out. Article 11Q from the Oregon Constitution, which allows us to extend affordability in lieu of repayment as part of the satisfaction of that loan. So all of this is getting tracked in ProLink, and we mostly put it in there so that we can see which projects are coming up on their 30-year affordability period, so that we can reach out to them and be like, hey, you're going to either repay, this is what you're going to need to repay, or do you want to extend for 30 years? Like that's the intent.
That's a good idea.
Of why we're using this. And as we go through our design process with you guys for the enhancement to the financials that we're doing, or to the loan system that we're doing with you, we're going to make sure that the draws show up on the loans as well. That's something that currently you can do. If you know that, you can attach a loan to a funding record in Dev and actually like see how the draws come down.
okay, we're at time. Did you take the one note? So I think, well, I guess I would say it seems like using loans for permanent sources at least is
part of it.
Is part of this. There may be some updates that we need to make around the balances and throughout the system, current balance stuff.
Agency money and not.
Agency money and not, which, yeah, there might be, I'll have to take a look at all the fields on loan to see what's available, but
Say that one more time, that last part.
whether it's agency money or not, or external. Yeah. Okay.
And then there may be another piece for other stuff.
Yeah, we'll have to think about the grant side. That's where those would go. And then there's still the agency activity funding, which I guess if we use loans, maybe that's not as much of an issue that I had on that last slide, but. Okay. All right, well, I guess we got through 2. So we may continue. Yeah. Where was that?
One favorite.
Do I get to pick one too?
No.
Oh, you can pick my favorite. I'll pick my favorite.
Yeah, so we could, we'll talk, maybe we'll go through a few more of these. We'll look at the next session and see what we have.
Okay.
Okay,
That's a great way to do it.
yeah, a lot of good collaboration. All right, well, take a quick break. Okay, we are going to get started here. We said we're going to keep going through the small medium list to get through a few more than 2, because there's a lot of good items on here that we want to review, and then we'll maybe like cut over halfway or whatever and talk about some of the large initiative stuff. So let's see here. So I'm going to go down to slides. Okay, so This small medium item was to, on the dev deal search, to include address. So basically expand the search capability to search for the address city of the new deal to reduce the number of duplicate portfolio properties created. So interested side, often our partners will change the name of a project between pre-development funding and their request for capital funds. Duplicate portfolio properties are sometimes created, and it's causing a headache for our portfolio team. So, okay, so a couple thoughts on this one. I guess first, I think I have a screenshot in here, so that might be kind of small, but you can see this is the add new dev deal page. And I think what we're requesting is for the, let's see, it's hard to see there. Basically, right now, I believe we're searching on deal name, and we want to search on address and city to include both those fields as well. And then potentially add those to the results grid below, where I have those red arrows could be some possible places to do this. So anyway, that's just some context. But I guess the first question is, should the results be filtered by deal name, address, and city all together? So like if you put in Garden Court and 123 Main and Denver is only going to return results that exactly match those three values. So that's one way we could go. The other way we could go is make it so that really just still search by name maybe, or just adding the address to the result field so you can see, oh, okay, I do already have this particular item, as opposed to like narrowing down the filtering. It's showing more information on the results. So does anyone have any thoughts or comments on this?
Go first, Becky.
So I'm the one that asked for this. Basically, what in my brain I kind of is, it wouldn't even look for really the address, but it would show the address.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
would be like the deal name, and then the city would be like what it would kind of search for. But it would show up anything that says Garden Court and then anything that says Denver.
Okay.
Basically.
Yeah, I mean, so we could put filters around all three of them. If you filled out all three, you're going to get a very small result set. If you just put in Denver, it can return ones with that or the name. But I think also putting it in the result grid with those arrows are putting some of that additional information could be helpful if we can fit it in there.
Okay, our concern is Garden Court used to be Bob's Apartments, same address. So they're looking for Garden Court, 123 Main Street. They don't see it, they don't pick it, they create a new deal, and now Bob's Apartments is there too.
So, don't get mad at me. Do we add name history like we have on property?
But that's name industry on the deal, but
Would that solve that
no,
issue?
it wouldn't solve this one. I know you want name history in general, but the, if I put in Garden Court, I put 123 Main, Denver, and there's something else that's already at 123 Main, Denver, I want to know that. I want to know that there already is something at that exact address.
Okay,
So then I'm not creating a new one just because it has a new name,
yeah.
right? But I don't necessarily need it to be everything in Denver. I want it to be the same address in Denver.
Okay.
So
So,
otherwise you're gonna
okay.
get everything in Denver.
So basically, the problem that we're having is that all of our land acquisition comes through the affordable rental housing section, and then we also handle our affordable homeownership land acquisition. And so they'll come in and they'll say, hey, this is Gladys Place lab loan. And then they'll go and apply and they'll say, oh, this is now Sunshine Apartments. But it's the same address.
So,
And
you
so-
need the address in the search.
Okay, so the address and just the address line versus city state
Address and city together
together.
would be
Yeah.
the address. So I would like to look for the name, and if I have a matching name, yes. And then look for the address, if I have a matching address, yes. So I could have both if that's what comes up.
Okay, so
To not be tied together.
gotcha. So the
Yeah.
Okay, so it could return results that have garden court apartments and return results that also have 123 Main Street,
Yes.
Denver, or whatever.
And while you're doing that, do it in text grid too.
Yeah, so that was the, yeah, yep.
Could be something where you say like, either match exactly or just match either of the fields. So
You want
that,
us to ask the question for people to answer?
It seems like you want more results, right?
yeah,
I
you
want
want to
more.
you want to be able to see more, but you could also potentially say, I want to match exactly the name and the address.
I don't trust them to do that. So
Okay.
I would prefer you to do that. Right? Yeah, no, because they don't have to pick it. They can say, never mind, going anywhere without it.
Right, yeah. This is just a little gate you're trying to put in place.
So then address and city then need to both be in the search results,
Yeah. I
right?
think that
So
would
you
make
see
sense.
why you got something.
Right.
Okay, so that's easy for portfolio property. For dev deal, I guess we would, if we were to add it to the search results, we would have to go down to the child deal property address to do a match on. And I can't recall, can we have multiple dev
No.
properties or just one? Okay, yeah. So anyway, we'd have to go down.
What
If
do
it's,
you mean?
there's
You
not,
lost me.
there's not a property on dev deal or an address. It's on,
It's down on the location,
On the-
isn't it?
It's
Well,
on the
there's-
dev property.
it's on the dev property.
Three
There's a
Oh,
properties,
okay,
location.
gotcha.
one
Yeah, yeah.
property in
So you'll have to go
record.
down.
Yeah.
It's not more than one, so you, same thing.
Okay, so then, yeah, we talked about adding physical address as a column to the search results grid.
So, okay, you'll get to TC then too, yeah.
Same changes on the new TC deal page. Yeah, so we want to make sure that we match those and that we're consistent. And then the last thing I threw out there is just, okay, that's an option that we can do. There's also that way that it works on blended deal page, the add blended deal page, where you have to search for a property and it brings up a modal, and then you type in kind of the same information and it returns a list of all these different results. I don't know if this is easier or causes more issues, but that is the way that the blended deal page works today. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Or anyone else? Does anyone use blended deal?
I didn't know that there was now a way to associate existing portfolio properties. Because the last time we tried to use it, there was no search.
Yeah, this one does not, I don't believe this does a search. I think you basically are typing in the name of the blended deal and it's going to create a TC, a dev deal, and a portfolio property, link them all together. But you do have the option down at that bottom part to search.
But that's new.
I think you can choose an existing portfolio property.
But you can't create one on that, can you?
It does.
Yeah, see, it will not create a new portfolio property if you've done the search. If you haven't done the search, it creates
Yeah,
one.
but that associated portfolio property stuff is new.
Oh, new, well, like in
I'm
the last
opening
couple of
this
years.
up in production right now.
Yeah.
1 second. Actually, yeah, there is now an associated portfolio property option down here, which was not here earlier it was not there in 2024.
I agree.
That
Or
could be
if we
true.
d- our eyes
We
didn't
might
see
have,
it.
I don't know. I can't recall if we had that
release
recently.
note was
Yeah. Let's go look back at the release notes.
See, they give us too much stuff that we can't even keep up with all the new stuff.
Right. So anyone have thoughts around this potential method or just kind of going back and adding those additional search options?
Just in general, it would be nice for that address to be a fuzzy search, because sometimes like if you take not a real address to like South 7th Street, there's like 6 different
Right.
variations of that. So
Right.
being able to accommodate some inconsistencies would be nice.
So as in like wildcard search type thing, or as in trying to understand that 7th is the same as 7th spelled out?
Oh, that'd be too hard.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
tricky. Unless we start using AI.
I don't know the answer.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
posing the question.
Does that have to be exact, though? What if they put Main Street? Would it find?
We could do
Say
it,
Main
like it
Street,
basically
or-
includes Main Street, yeah.
If
In
they
the
had
link.
like STE versus street spelled out,
Yeah, that wouldn't match
that
that.
would, yes, that would.
That's where it gets tricky. That's where you probably only want to put like the core part of the address,
That's what I'm
not
saying.
avenue or street or that type of, when you're doing your searches at least. Unless we put some AI in to be smart about it. But
I mean, we try and tell people to use the search first to see if it exists and then go add the deal. Because
Right.
the search has all the fuzzy, all the different options.
Yeah.
They forget.
So option one.
Sounds like option one here, though, is the preferred method. Okay.
Did you write it down?
Okay, this is a fun one here. So this is updating the message when email is already in use. When you add a new user to Perform Work Center and enter the email address, if the email address is already being used by another user, it should tell you that in the pop-up message instead of stating it was a success. There was no comments on this one. So the way that this currently works is when you go into a work center, I think I have a screenshot here, and you're adding a collaborator and you click the little plus button and it brings up this modal, and you type in John Smith and John Smith at some address. There's logic that it's going to go see, okay, does that email address already exist? If it does, then it's just going to say, okay, invite that person in to this work center, but it's going to preserve the name that's on their profile, not the name that you gave them here. So there's a little bit of nuance there. But I think the request is that how do you know that that person was already there or already in the system? And so is there some way that we could provide more information or let you know that, yeah, you just added someone that does already have a Perform profile, and you want to add them to this work center. So before I kind of jump into maybe some thoughts or questions there, does anyone have any other feedback on this particular item?
So when you're adding a contact into Procorum and it's John Smith, it's going to default to what's already there if the email address is the same.
Yes, if the email address
They're
exists.
sharing it.
So we have situations where like the manager of the property, it might be manager1234@res1.com, but the name will change.
Right. I think we've had issues with that where it'll be a shared email address and
Yeah.
then it'll be John Smith one day and then changes to
Mhm.
Mary down the road or something
Yeah.
like that. So, yeah, right now, like once the person has their profile, they're kind of in control of that name that's on their profile. And so they would have to go in and update their name if they wanted it to change.
But, if that person's gone, has been
Mhm.
replaced, who would update their profile?
Well, they should, if it's the same email address, they should be able to still do a forgot password and get back into the system with that common email address, and then they'd have to go to their profile and update their name.
Okay.
Which is why we wanted it to tell us that, because it would just say successful and that person would say, we never got the email. And we're like, well, John Smith, we sent it to you, we sent it to you again and never got an email. And then we'd finally figure out that it's going to the other person and it's not sending them anything because you don't need to invite them, right? Because they're already in the system. And so you have to tell John Smith to log in, change his name, blah, 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 blah. But you don't know to do
Yeah, and
that.
there is some nuance too, like, there's a couple levels here, so there's like, if you exist in Procorum as a profile, that's one level, and then the next level is, are you associated to this account? So if, let's say John Smith was not associated to your account, he may have a profile, so it's gonna pick up his name that he has in his profile because he already exists in Procorum, but then because he's not part of your account, he'll get an account invite and it'll say, hey, come join the Virginia housing account, right? If he already exists in your account and he has a profile and you add him through this method or just typing in the quick type ahead search where you choose him, he gets a different email that says you've been added to a new work center in Virginia's account. It's not an invite, it's just kind of informational that you've been added to this other work center.
And do they get that if they turn notifications on?
Good question, not sure, I'll have to double check. It's probably going to their junk or something, but yeah.
We had asked in a previous year that we had some access to change the profile to fix
Yeah,
these things?
that's the next one on the list here.
Okay.
So. So I guess, so some possible solutions that we could do for this. We could add some information on the modal pop-up that basically says, if there already exists, then, we'll be picking up their name or whatever, we'll let you know. It could be that after they click save on the modal that we display an orange, we call it a noti, that's that little like banner thing that shows up. We have different colors. So orange is kind of like informational warning. And we could let them know that this collaborator was already found in Procorum, already had a profile, and that we'll be using their existing profile name. And then we could also maybe add an indicator or something. I think I have another screenshot here. So this is what it looks like after you've gone through that modal. We could add something next to there that says John Smith, existing profile, or something along those lines, so you do know that you are adding someone that is in Procorum already.
That the email address is in.
That the email address is in, yeah, that we have a match on that. Let's see, did I have anything else? I think, yeah. So providing more information around that, maybe that could be useful or helpful. Anyone have any other thoughts on that particular item? Would anyone use this today? Would this be useful? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So then let's talk about the next one. So this one kind of, I don't know, morphed a little bit, but so this one was improved user management and reporting. This feature would add more reporting indicators to the number of members or guests on a work center, who's logged in recently, which work centers might be missing internal staff or outside partners, and what work centers someone who is no longer on the account was previously a part of. So on the interested side, data views, I think we've probably done, or you're able to get some of that information in the new data view functionality for collaborators. So that's helped, but still need inactive and the ability to update the profile. And then one person didn't really see any value in this one. So a couple questions. Let's talk about the inactivated user versus removing them from the account. I know this is yours, Elena, so do you want to talk about that particular item?
I should clarify first that we got a security audit. We got audited for our security controls. And when you have users that have been in accounts, especially for older deals and things like that, if you can inactivate them and they can't get into Procorum anymore, that satisfied the audit and it kept the fact that they had ever been on these deals, right? But if I remove them from the account completely, then all their everything they were ever on, everything they've ever done, it's all not there anymore to find. And we can't prove to audit that we inactivated them as of their termination date. They're just gone. So we got in trouble for that. And then right now, how we figured out how to remove them is we have to look and see if they're the only internal user on any work center, because if I remove them, now I have orphaned work centers with only external people, right? So I have to go do all the data views and try and do lookups against tables to figure out if they're the only member. And then if they are, find out who else can replace them before I delete them from the system, because we can't have orphaned work centers.
Are you using members and guests?
Right, so I'm using the data
between those
view,
two?
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm taking the assigned work centers from the user and comparing it to the work centers in the data view that shows me the number of members to see which ones. Yeah.
So those are kind of two separate use cases then. Like one is knowing what someone used to be on, but they're not on any work centers or on your account anymore, and just having some visibility into the kind of that past history. And then the other is this other use case here where, yeah.
Right, and right now we don't do guests at all. We don't inactivate them or remove them, because even if they haven't been in there for years, eventually we remove them, but then we have to figure out if they're the only external on a work center, and it's.
Right, yeah. And with the new password expire functionality, they wouldn't be able to get in after X number of days.
Unless they still have access to their email because they used a private email instead of a work email.
Yeah, they could update their password and then they
Right.
can get back in, yeah. Okay.
Audit's coming back in August. Can I have an answer?
Okay. Okay. So that's the inactive thing. We do have some of that data in the system, so there could be some kind of read-only view of previous users on your account, and maybe the work centers that they were on. Maybe it's another like admin data view, so we'll have to do some brainstorming on that. Take some notes on that, yeah.
Does it show in the activity that they user was removed? We're gonna use that for your audit.
It does, but you have to scroll a lot probably to see.
You can't sort, you can't search or anything.
We don't have a data view on activity right now. That could be an option.
I mean,
If you made a data view for activity, if we made a data view for activity, could you use in-grid filtering to search for, like, remove?
you need
to
Yeah,
to
we
find
could.
the people that you
is people a
removed?
data view right now?
Collaborators is, I don't believe people is currently. That could be additional one, but.
Yeah,
But this one would probably be just an activity data view, and you'd be able to search if the content contains a person's name and the word removed, I guess.
can we do that?
Maybe. Activities is a little bit complex. We'd have to kind of flatten out the data to put it into a data view. But yeah,
But you're saying you know that they were in my account and I removed them. I just can't see it.
correct.
So why couldn't you show me that?
We could show you that as the alternative. I mean, maybe having an activity data view is just useful in general, but for your specific case, maybe being able to show the behind the scenes activity of that person on your account could be useful.
That would be very useful. I've had to contact you guys to find out if certain users were doing certain things after we offboarded them. Because we weren't sure, and there was some suspicious activity on other accounts that they had, and that.
Yeah.
So inactive data seems to me like,
Yeah, that may be easier.
plus it's, for security purposes, a little bit.
You can get them out immediately with an active.
Then you can say, active, and still do the activity report, or you can do some search off of that person and just say, when was the last time you did anything across our account?
And with inactive, then you don't lose the history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have time to reassign the orphan work centers.
Yeah.
Because, if they leave today, I can't kick them out for at least a week before I get all their work centers.
Yeah.
Right.
On Work Center's data view, is there like a count of collaborators?
Yes.
So you can
That's
filter
how I do
down
it.
to the one person.
I would also like to add, maybe to this, we would like to know if account administrators are accessing information on the accounts.
Yes, we know about that one. It's a little bit, it's kind of 50-50 right now on some activity events that are being written when an admin performs an action on a work center. We want to make that consistent, so.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have account administrators who can go into accounts they're not on, open up documentation, and it doesn't.
And it
show
doesn't
up in the
record an
activity
event.
feed at all.
Yeah. That's been a little bit, we had some issues with that in the years past. I think it was, I can't remember if it was a request or not to say, yeah, make the admin invisible. And so maybe there was some of that left over, but I think, yeah, we want to make sure that we actually record, those events. There was some trickiness where we had to, if you performed an event on a work center that you weren't on as an administrator, we had to add you behind the scenes to the work center to be able to record all that information. So we just need to, we probably continue to do that, but also actually record the event consistently. I think we do it on some events, but not all. You make a note of that. I know we have a bug, I think, for that, but just, okay.
So inactive.
Yeah, and we have some flags on already that we might be able to reuse. We'll just have to take a look with our dev team and see what makes sense. Yeah.
Would that be like, you want the administrator activity to be visible to you internally, but not show up to maybe a guest user in a work center seeing that an administrator was in there? Like, would there be segmentation of that activity and who sees it?
I mean, I think as long as we could pull some kind of report where, like, if we had an administrative activity log that said this user was on there doing that. But some of our developers, they get really weird, but they put documents in there and they go, I wanna know who has access to see this. And so when we tell them, you're on this work center and only the people on that collaborator list can see that, and then we find out that internally other people have gone in and have that, the administrator role, they pick up the paperwork and then they're talking about it on a call, but there's no activity log. We've been caught a few times where the developers have come back and gone, where was that? When did I get notified that this was happening?
So yeah, you would see if, once we fix this, you'd see the activity event of the admin downloading that file, but they wouldn't show up on the right collaborator sidebar unless you explicitly added them. So you'd see the activity. So
And I
is
think
that
that's okay,
okay?
but right now
Yeah.
the activity's not showing at all.
Right, yep, okay.
So does that mean we still need an activity data
That'd
view?
just be fixed, that's something.
Yeah, that's just a bug.
So there's, that,
But do we still need an activity data view? So you could.
Yeah, could be valuable.
Search.
That's the hardest one, but yeah, there's it's a tricky one. Yeah, there's so many activity types. I'm sure VDOT will figure it out.
let's move on to the next one.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so then the second part of this one, this gets tricky too. This is where you basically want to update someone's profile. Like they can't figure out how to go to their profile and change their name. And so you want to do it on their behalf. And so,
I have a question.
yeah.
Would it, no, I don't even know how to ask the question. So like, Elena, maybe for you, those people are guests only, or are they sometimes members? And would that make it easier? You know what I mean, to do,
Maybe.
to
I think
allow
they're
it
still
for a
the same.
guest?
Still have to.
I think it applies no matter what.
It applies no matter what. If I have a profile and, my name's Brian Cohen, you go change me to John Smith just because you want to, maybe I don't want you to change my name. So I feel like there needs to be a little bit of a request confirm process potentially, but at least it's maybe more apparent and obvious when they log in to accept that change. So that was kind of some of the stuff that we had down below is maybe you're in your people and permissions page and you can go in and say, I want to change this person's name, and you basically request a profile change for them. And that could be either their first name, last name, maybe some address or phone information on their profile. The user would receive an email, John Admin at XYZ agency is requesting you change the following details on your profile. Then they'd be able to log in. When they log in, then they'd get a prompt that shows up and says, do you want to make these changes to your account?
My only question is log in to accept these changes. I would want them to log in to decline. Because we get a lot of ownership entities that want to be on there, but they never actually accept their invitation. And if we spell it wrong or something, then we'll get a comment of you didn't do this right, or that's the wrong name or something, and we can't fix it because we've already started it. And that person is somebody who never actually logs in, or maybe logs in once, but he has to be on there, it's one of those situations.
Yeah.
I want to be able to fix, like we had some where somebody accidentally didn't put everything in lowercase. So their person's first name and last name was all lowercase, and then they spelled something wrong, and I couldn't do it. I had to leave it there, and someone was always telling me how it was wrong.
Yeah. I think the thing that we're trying to avoid is any malicious activity on it. So like if I went and changed someone's name to Sean McKenna and then I started impersonating him and saying, oh, and he has to log in to decline that change.
But I'm not changing their email
Right.
address, I'm just changing.
You're their name.
Yeah, but how would I act like them?
See, a lot of times, the
Yeah.
first person to put in the name would be later, we're the ones who put it, because this is
Right.
what I need to.
Yeah.
I put them in and I call them by a nickname or whatever, and then once you get to know, they don't go by that name, but they never figure out how to go to their profile either.
Yeah.
And so then how do you change it on the work center so that it's more appropriate? And that's it could be something where if they've never edited or even pulled up their profile, maybe you let us change it for them. And then once they've started editing their profile, because their profile goes across multiple accounts.
Exactly,
So
right.
they're gonna, maybe not want it to be changed based upon, there might be a certain way that they want it for multiple accounts outside.
Right.
Right.
So, but could it be like that, or?
And if it's
I mean,
only
we
the
could-
admin who could do it, right?
Well, the admin on your account, but if they're on another account, there could be, you could be fighting back and forth with who gets the name change. It could be, I don't know, I mean, it's probably an edge case for sure. There could be just an email that goes out that says an admin changed your name, and at least you're notified about it, and then you can go update your profile if you want to.
So this goes back to the issue that Kim had, which was the shared email addresses. If we could change the name for the shared email addresses for them,
Yeah.
because usually that person is just like, they're gone, make it be my name, and they don't want to do it themselves.
Like a designation that this is a shared,
Or just the fact that we know as admins, we know it's a shared email box, and we know the manager's gone, so we're gonna replace their name for them, so we don't have to spend 10 minutes or 20 minutes on the phone walking them through how to do profile change.
right?
Yeah. Can't we just make a video?
They will watch.
We need a help video, Andrea.
There you go.
Here's, oh, you can't change your profile, here's an email or a video.
I agree though, because they'll send me an email of the new person's name for the email, but they won't go in and change it.
Right, yeah.
Katie, go ahead.
So, trying to head this off a little bit, whenever we get a request to add someone that's a generic email, like Shawnee Villas property manager, and it's this generic email, we tell them, your first name's gonna be Shawnee Villas and your last name's gonna be property manager. And that's how we set up the account.
Right, so then you
That
never have to
helps a
change
little
it.
bit,
Yeah.
and we tell people when you post, make sure you put your name. So we actually know it's
who we're talking
it's Amanda at Shawnee Villas, but some people then go in because they do update the profile and then they put their name, which is great because we want people to go in and add their profile information, but then there's turnover.
Right.
So then trying to go back, so it's a battle both ways, like
Mhm.
with the generic email, trying to set up a generic first and last name. And then, yeah.
So Elena, I'm thinking you said you got audited, so what are they gonna say about you editing somebody's profile? Is that gonna cause a problem?
No, because I would have some kind of email trail or something that told me
Okay.
to do it.
Okay, okay.
Isn't there a message though on our login page now that says you can't share emails?
Yeah, they do it anyway.
They don't, they ignore
That
it.
just showed up. That literally just showed up.
Yeah,
That's the, you promise to behave paragraph,
right,
and they promise, but that doesn't mean they're not gonna use the shared email account.
yeah.
Maybe for the shared ones, when we change the name, we can force a password reset. I don't
Yeah.
know, just thinking.
Yeah.
For that, okay, that'd be nice if we could force a password reset too. We can't do that right now, it just has to expire at some point.
Right, yeah,
Mhm.
we can do that.
Because I have other software that if I change something, I can force a password reset.
Yeah.
So I can say, if this guy ever comes back in, make him create a new password.
Yeah.
Yeah, that way they're just not using the same one of that same company,
Right.
and he can still get in if he just puts in that
Email address,
and
because
that
email-
password,
yeah.
he knows what it is.
Yeah,
So that would be a good idea.
that might.
I'm going to go make Kelly change her email address every 5 days.
Better not.
Okay,
I mean, people know how to update their profile, like for their bank account. So if
Right.
the problem is they're not able, like they can't figure it out, maybe we just make the process simpler.
right. That's kind of what we were thinking a little bit, is there some way to make it easier but they'd have to log in, I think, to make that, whether we prompt them or whatever.
I mean, you have to
We
log into
know.
your bank account to change anything.
Right, but if you called your bank and said they had your name wrong, they would fix it for you.
My mouth wouldn't. They'd be like, you need to come here in person
Well, I
with
mean-
67 forms of ID, and they all have to be real, except for this one has to be this other thing. Yeah, not my baby.
But if you went to Facebook and said, can you change this other person's name, they probably wouldn't.
Right, but if I call Facebook, no, not Facebook, Facebook's awful.
Yeah, I know.
But if I, I
Uh,
was thinking if, I'm trying to solve the scenario where I have the people that don't actually ever log in, but I want to make their name look right.
right, yeah,
And I have the people who share an email address and they seem to be okay with the fact that it never has their real name. And then we have the issue with MFA stuff coming, that if I have a shared email address, I put in my cell phone number, now I can change the password because I have the code. And you can't, because you can't get in there. You have to,
they'd have to switch to email then.
right, so they'd have to just reset the password, switch to email, get in there, change the profile. I mean, there's a lot of steps.
Yeah,
We're just wondering a way to make it
Yeah.
faster, but.
yeah,
I mean, we could keep going down the route where we just send them a video and say, figure it out. You know?
That seems like a lot of hand holding. I don't know.
Oh, God, we do that a lot.
Yeah, we try to avoid that. Because otherwise they'll call you next time the Teams or email. I'd rather have it in the user hands to make those options.
Yeah, we have a
How
whole
about we just check
application
to see if they're on another account? If they're not, then.
That could be-
We can change the
yeah.
profile. If they are on another account.
If they're-
You'd have to send out an email asking them to change it.
we could do that. I would say probably 90% of these people are only on one account,
Right.
so,
And if they're on multiple accounts, they probably already have it, right?
yeah, they probably know how to go to their
They don't have a lot of time to
profile.
do it.
Yeah, so that's a good idea.
Do you make this like a specific priv so that like, do you know what I mean? So that like, if Elena wants to have her account admins be able to do this, she can. But if Katie prefers that nobody can do this in her account, she doesn't ever give this to anybody. Would that help?
Wouldn't it be a user manager? Because there's a user manager role too. I don't know how you're gonna do it.
Yeah,
I would make the account admin.
probably account admin's the easiest. And right now, there's not like individual pros you can set on account
Right.
admin.
Right,
Which is why you
Um,
limit who has it, because
right,
it has
yeah.
superpowers.
yes.
Delete the whole account.
I mean, we could, yeah, we
Mhm.
could determine if, like, there's basically account admin, work center admin, user admin. That's kind of like the levels down. So we could decide if we added this new ability where it would go. But you'd probably have to do it through people and permissions. So it wouldn't be like, I guess that's a question, like, it wouldn't be an asset manager that's a work center owner on one work center that could change it. It would have to be something that,
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be a situation where we already tried to do the profile route. We already tried to do this, and now we're
Right,
just frustrated, and save us from our frustration.
yeah, fix it for me.
I guess, for us, we would like to see some role management features put into this so that we can assign specific permissions to be able to edit this or change that, but not this other thing.
Right. Yeah, we have that at the work center level, but the account security roles, those are kind of baked in right now. So that has been like a long-term roadmap to kind of break out all those individual privs and make it so you can create your own account level security roles. But right now it just has like 4 fixed ones, I believe. So,
Well, we support the
yeah.
that future state.
Oh, I see what you said down there. I just finally understood what the Melissa's user thing was. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, someone creates a Proquarm account and then knows some people, email addresses, and starts trying to go change everyone's names. So, just trying to avoid something like that.
Share email address as the username, and because we tried deleting them and fixing them, but that doesn't work, because once you've created the profile with the email address, it's locked forever, and we have to call you and have you delete it.
Oh, for like if they want to change their email address?
No, like if
Or-
we put in the email address and then we totally messed up the name and we can't fix it, and so someone goes, well, just delete them and do it again, but you can't.
Yeah, right.
Then
Yeah.
you get that error we just talked about where it doesn't tell you you can't.
That they're there with
Because
a
the-
different name, yeah, yeah,
We do need to be able to get back to that.
yeah. Okay. I think we have some ideas to brainstorm some more. We'll, yeah, put out a preview doc and see what we can come up with. Okay, does anyone have any other thoughts on this one? Guess we 15 minutes. What do we have left here? Okay, so we could either talk about bulk delete tasks, or the first item on the large survey was downloading from Procorum bulk files. So I don't know, is there, show of hands, because we only have about 15 minutes left. Show of hands, who wants to talk about bulk delete tasks in a work center? Okay, nobody? Oh, a couple people, one or two. And then being able to download multiple files from Quorum. Okay, sounds like we're switching to that one.
We'll have to circle back maybe afterwards to talk about it.
Yeah, okay, so let me